Here's the second image. Now this is one that when I was looking through his gallery and I came across this, I thought, we've got to do this for a Paintover. It has so much potential. I think he's done good to come up with this scene, but I feel like maybe Daniel was struggling a little bit of how to render some of the elements or how to resolve some of the problems that this scene intrinsically has. Before I started the Paintover, these are the elements that I want to address. One is the darks are heavy-handed. Closer you get to black, you just lose more and more color. Bring some of those midtones back so that we have a wider palette range and more color in this scene. He has a rim light. Everything here has a rim light on it. The character has the same value range as the background, and even the color is very similar. Instead of using a rim light in order to try to differentiate two things, try to use actual value tones against each other, and then use rim light to accent that if you actually need it. Something else is the way the light is being handled with these sunbeams. I think he probably used like a linear dodge or hard light layer in order to try to get the feeling of sunlight. Now this is a key one. Usually to get a sense of powerful sunlight, it's not about actually painting the light. It's about how you handle what is being lit. It's not the light itself, it's the thing being lit. So instead of painting the light beams, show me how the things look that are being lit and convince me that way. Light, of course, is invisible. You don't see light. You only see the things that light hits. Unless this is a very dusty or foggy scene, you wouldn't even have sun rays. We want to go with a more professional, a more nuanced way of handling that light. Another aspect let's address is the color scheme. And the color scheme is, I would say, a little too limited right now. I do like a red-green dynamic. Hey, that's cool. However, we can expand that out a little bit. We can use some, something more to the blue or gray range. We can use things more to the cool magentas, purples. Another thing that I would really want to utilize is the flowers. Flowers, in my mind, are not unlike stained glass. Bright colored flower petals being backlit can be the same thing as stained glass. So I saw that and I thought, okay, let's do these things. Tone down the darks, treat the flowers like stained glass. Let's use values and colors to differentiate her from the background and then see what we get. And this was my ultimate answer. Same scene. I really did not hardly move anything. I didn't create new content, but it's an entirely different feel to the scene. It still has a strong sense of sunlight with almost no rays in it. I left, a little faint rays coming in here. I'm using how light affects things in order to sell that. I'm also utilizing the flowers so that they're more vibrant. I'm playing up the connection between the red on her with the red on the flowers. And I'm making her stand out from the background using a difference of colors and values rather than doing an edge light. So let's step through the process and see how I came up with this. So the process began, as usual, with finding some reference. What I want to find a reference for is how another artist handled the same situation. I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. I'm not stealing from their artwork and I'm not trying to paint their image or use their image. I just want to see how they handled it so that I can learn from that. And I do remember that I had saved this image from the fellow whose name you see on your screen now, and I won't try to pronounce. Anyway, Mr. T, as I'll call him. I highly suggest you go out there and take a look at his gallery. I remember saving this. Now this isn't exactly what I want, but it has the foreground, midground, background. It's in a forest, a lot of the same dynamics. So I took that and I modified it so it has a different color scheme, and I used that as a reference to begin painting the Paintover. If you are thinking, well, you just used another piece of artwork, what I'm looking at are the ratios. What was the ratio between his background and his midground? How much lighter? How much cooler did it become with the distance? I'm looking at those ratios and I want to incorporate those ratios into my image. So I began painting my background and I established these in layers. So each plane of the image is on its own layer just for simplicity, and I can keep things separated and adjust them that way. I am working in big blocks, so all of the background is toned down to this atmospheric sort of gray color. The midground is getting a bit of different color on that tree. I'm thinking of this tree more in silhouette as a big block. Once I establish the big blocks and those work, then we can go in and do more detailing and add vines and stuff. Next, we continue with the background, painting some of the trees, establishing some of the lights coming through the canopy. Next, we begin working on the flowers. Why do we work on the flowers next instead of like the character or something? It's because we're trying to take care of the big blocks first. When you are trying to judge colors and values against each other in an image, and there's a large piece of that you know is the wrong color and the wrong value, then it's hard to judge accurately against it. It's better to do your big blocks first so you can make accurate judgments, and then you can go back into the little things. So with these, I am referencing a picture of a backlit rose. I did not paint any one of the references that I found on that. I'm just looking for the colors that was in the flower and the dynamics of how it was lit. I try to keep with the leaves and how things are arranged from the original. I'm trying not to move things around and create new stuff. But some of it was simply so dark, I don't know really what he had going on over here. So I just kind of make up some leaves and shapes. I'm working on the character. All right. Quite a bit of time actually went into this one little step here, but let's talk about some of the thoughts behind this. This is not unlike the previous Paintover. We're having a lot of value change in the skin. We're having a lot of rim lights in order to stand the character out. So we're trying to remove the rim lights. We're trying to get every block, every element of the character to have a tone that allows it to stand out from things around it based on its tone and not based on a rim light. For the face, you can tell if I flip this back and forth how much I adjusted the face. This has a very strong sort of yellow brown tone to it, and I've cooled it down a lot here. And we're blocking the hair in differently. Instead of making the hair stand out because it has light on it, I'm going to make the hair darker and brighten the tree behind it. And that is a technique that you see a lot in good artwork, is doing a slight lightness behind a dark object so that that dark object stands out a little more and you don't have to put a light on it. I'm also brightening up the red on the scarf and the dress in order to create a stronger connection between the roses or whatever they are and the fabric of the character. Because if it's not for the red on her, she really could get lost more in this scene. Now, this is an artistic direction that is completely viable. If you wanted to not even use red, or let's say you use the red, but you put it all in shadow, that could be kind of cool. It could be kind of cool so that you initially look at the scene and it's about these flowers and a tree. And then it takes half a second for that second read and you go, oh, there's a character there. And it becomes a little different about a feeling. In this one, you do want the character to stand out, but you want it to be a connection between her and the flowers. Establishing some more cool light in the shadow side. I'm also not trying to keep all the details. I just didn't have the time for it on this Paintover, so there's some like little gold stuff going on this. This is where I was talking about earlier. Don't draw the light, draw the thing that the light is hitting. Mainly back here in the background, I'm establishing just a couple of points where I'm having scattered bright colors of light. I used a couple of different brushes for this. One was this little scattering brush, so that when I'm painting with it, it's going to give me this effect. I can have bright light coming through the canopy. I can have bright colors down here where the light is hitting, but also have some color in the middle that is cooler from just the distance and not having to blow that out. I'm continuing that process I just mentioned of brightening the thing behind the character so the character stands out more. Now, you have to be a little subtle about how you go about it. If I went and wanted this character to really stand out, I could put a really bright light on that tree behind her. Is she going to stand out more? Yeah. But you also need to justify how that light is on that tree. One solution is that you could actually have, justify some light falling across this tree, right? And so now it's light coming through the canopy and it's happening just to fall behind her head, and her head stands out a little more. I don't think that's great because you're breaking up this nice big dark object behind her. I just think you're fragmenting the values too much that way. But if you can keep it so it's just artistic freedom that it's a little lighter, that's cool. That can work. Small adjustments over here. I decided to add a light. So I'm thinking there's a light coming down and it's going to hit this part. I just want some of the red to stand out. So I have one little light hitting here. But I also think, well, what if the light comes down here and is also hitting this and catching on some of the arrow fletches? This allows this part to stand out. That was one part that was really getting lost more, and I didn't want to have to brighten this part back a lot for it to stand out. One small area that I can put a light on, make it stand out. I play around several times with the lighting coming down here and hitting these leaves, so you have the bright green in the foreground. In one hand, you could just make them all dark, and that way the red really stands out. When you get this small, the bright green sort of melds into the midground. So I try to limit it a little bit. I think it's an idea worth exploring to have some of the bright green, but be careful how you do it, otherwise you're going to break up the values of the foreground. And we also start introducing the spiked edges on these leaves. I'm not sure what kind of leaf these are. I like that. I think Daniel should definitely keep that because it is a way to give some visual detail without having to go real detailed. It creates a great visual pattern that contrasts well against the big, soft, curved shapes of the flowers. Next, focus and sunlight. This is the final step. Added some sunlight, just kind of bending around this tree, making it feel a bit more rounded. Added some cool tones in the bark on the top, anything facing upwards got a little bit cooler, just expanding that palette out a little bit. And I also put the foreground out of focus. And this is an artistic decision. The piece could go this way, the piece could not go this way. One is not right, one is not wrong. If you want this image to be more about the character, then put the flowers out of focus. I just selected all of that area and I went up to filter, blur, and ran a lens blur on it. And that put them out of focus the way that the camera would. Putting them out of focus automatically directs your eye into the other part of the image. Your eye wants to find stuff that's in focus and look at that. However, keeping them all sharp, which is completely acceptable, makes it more about the scene than it is about that particular character. Something to think about there. And with that, that is the steps that I went through. I appreciate you watching. Until I see you next time, keep drawing.